If you listened to the show yesterday, the beginning of the show yesterday, Wednesday, 8 to 10 p.m., which you should have listened. There's really no excuses. You have to listen to all 2 hours. And then if you miss it, you can listen to the podcast. So I'm going to assume that you did listen. You will have heard my take on this whole condolence call controversy. I haven't heard anyone call it condolence callgate yet or anything. I'm sure that's coming. But I talked about how I can't believe this is where we are in politics today. I compared it to a reality TV show. And that's what a lot of this seems like. We're now debating what was said, not said in a call. And this is dominating the 24-hour news cycle. It's dominating social media. It's dominating all the news outlets. And really, to me, it's just beyond reason. Well, I have a story I'm going to get to in a sec from Mediaite that really sums it up well, exactly how I think about it. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We are on until 10 p.m. tonight, right here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. If you're listening to the live show, we have a lot to get to. We're not going to talk about this condolence call thing for all 2 hours. I have a lot of other stuff I want to get to. Ted Cruz debated Bernie Sanders over taxes. Some great stuff there. Rand Paul is standing up to the Republican establishment. We're going to talk about that. George W. Bush was coming out of the woodwork. He made a speech today. And now all of a sudden the left loves him. Really? This is insulting to my intelligence. I was there. It wasn't that long ago he was president. We were there. We remember what you said about him back then. So we'll get to that as well. And, of course, I'll end the show with things that made Yaffee laughy. And we have Mr. Tom Benson, who is producing tonight. How are you, Tom?
Here we are. We're back again for more of the big show.
The big show.
And everything that is going on in the world. And I'll tell you, 24 hours doesn't go by without something happening.
Yeah, this is very true. And the 24-hour news cycle is a lot of beyond reason.
But unfortunately, a lot of it is hyped.
Yeah.
Because the people, certain news agencies will use any bit of news or information they can to spin against the president.
Right. This is very true. I mean, we were watching CNN before we got on the show tonight. It just happened to be in the break room. It was on.
Mm-hmm.
And I if I watched that all day, I'd hate Trump too. I watched like 15 minutes of it, and they never give him the benefit of the doubt. And, I understand Fox did the same thing with Obama, so I guess you can't say much, but still, it's just, constant. So I wanted to get to this piece I found, and we are going to play. John Kelly made some comments about all of this. His chief of staff, General John Kelly. We're going to play his comments, which were very good. I mean, Trump should just have him say everything for him, really. That's never going to happen, but, But they were very good, so we'll get to that. We'll also get to some other things that Frederica Wilson said, Congressman Wilson said about all this. So we'll get to that in a sec. But I found this piece in Mediaite by Joseph Wolfson.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the headline, and it's exactly how I feel, to be honest. So that's why it got my attention. It says, everything about this condolence call news story, puts news story in quotes, everything about this condolence call news story is shameful. Is shameful. I couldn't agree more. It says the 24-hour news cycle manages to keep hitting new lows. But what has occurred over the past 72 hours has truly been nauseating. Yes. I would agree with that completely. It says it all began Monday when President Trump was confronted about his delayed response to the 4 Green Berets that were killed in Niger earlier this month. Now, why he was confronted about that? I mean, would they have ever confronted Obama about something like that? No. So that he doesn't write that, but that's kind of my point too.
Mm-hmm.
Why was this even brought up? But Trump, of course, made it worse. He said instead of owning up to the fact that he hadn't reached out to their families yet, he falsely claimed that President Obama and other predecessors didn't make calls. That, of course, sparked bipartisan condemnation. which is true because they did make calls. So Trump goes out there and he blusters and he says things on the defensive. We all know that. And I thought he shouldn't have said that because it just makes it worse. He continues on the piece here. He says he only made matters worse the next day when he dragged his chief of staff, General John Kelly, into the mess by claiming Obama never called him when his son was killed in battle in November 2010. And while a White House official confirmed that Obama never called him, Kelly did attend a Gold Star family breakfast at the White House in 2011 and shared a table with then First Lady Michelle Obama. Then late Tuesday, Representative Frederica Wilson alleged that Trump heartlessly told the pregnant widow of Sergeant LaDavid Johnson that he knew what he signed up for, sparking a media uproar. All day Wednesday, the media searched far and wide for every Gold Star family they could find from the Trump presidency. CNN found a widow who said the president never called her after she was promised, and the Washington Post tracked down a grieving father who Trump promised to send $25,000 but never did, until the story broke this week. So the writer continues on here, and this is what he says. This is the point that I feel. He says, to be honest, nearly everything about this story has been sickening. He says, like many of his unforced errors, Trump brought much of this chaos upon himself. Had he not waited so long to contact the families, none of this would have happened. And then, of course, he tried to throw Obama under the bus and past presidents under the bus over Gold Star families. He continues on there. He says, that being said, Trump isn't the only one at fault in this ordeal. So let's revisit Representative Wilson's allegation that Trump is basically a soulless monster. It's no secret that he isn't a wordsmith, and we all know how hard he hits his political enemies, especially on Twitter. But it's tough for me, at least to buy the narrative, that he was so callous to a grieving widow of a fallen soldier. This is what I said yesterday. And this, what I'm reading right now is someone who's not really a big Trump fan, I'm gathering. And yet he's even admitting it's hard for me to believe that Trump is going to be that callous, that insensitive to a widow of a fallen soldier. I don't think anyone reasonably, if they're honest with themselves, I don't think they believe that. He continues on. He says, even Wilson herself admitted she didn't listen to the whole thing. And he continues on saying, she's obviously not an unbiased source. She has been outspoken with her animosity towards Trump, claiming he was on the brink of impeachment, boycotting his inauguration. She knows the benefits from this ongoing feud with Trump because all the attention she's been getting, so she's going to milk this thing as much as possible. Even if she was right, the media has a responsibility to properly vet her claim instead of taking her at her word. And Trump didn't do himself any favors by saying he had proof that Wilson was lying, just like he said he had proof Obama was wiretapping Trump Tower. It's he said, she said, and that's it. Enough with the impulsive BSing, Mr. President. That's what he says. And that's Trump's philosophy. He just fights back. He throws punches. He's not going to go down without a fight. He continues on. He says, and the media has turned this into a feeding frenzy. They're not reaching out to these Gold Star families because they feel bad for them. They're using them as props to try and make Trump look bad.
Hear, hear.
And in the case of the father that was owed $25,000, it worked. Now, from here on out, anytime our brave men and women die overseas, their families will be hounded by the press, and the press will set impossible standards for Trump, which, again, he can blame himself for after he trashed Obama's response to these families. He continues on. He says, the media has already spent countless hours on what they deem is must-see news. It's only their latest shiny object. God forbid they cover actual news, like how the FBI confirmed that James Comey drafted his exoneration for Hillary Clinton months before he closed the email investigation, or how the Obama-era Department of Justice kept the Russian corruption surrounding the Uranium One deal under wraps. This is what I basically said yesterday, and a lot of other conservative commentators said. Or the extremely underreported criminal trail of Senator Bob Menendez, who, of course, is a Democrat. Or better yet, they can cover the actual attack, something we still know very little about. That's a great point. Want to cover something? Cover the actual attack. Instead of honoring the heroes who have made the ultimate sacrifice, both Trump supporters and haters in both D.C. and in the media will use their deaths as opportunities to push their own narrative that the president is either wonderful or a sociopath. Everyone should leave these grieving families alone because everything about this news cycle has been downright shameful. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I think I completely agree with that assessment. When this story first came out, I just felt like it was insulting to my intelligence, to be honest. We're having a debate on whether Trump hates the troops and hates the widows of fallen soldiers. Really? Does anyone really believe this? I guess some people actually do, but I think we just find things, once again, to hate about each other. So I thought I had to share that piece with you. In the next segment, we're going to get into what John Kelly said. He spoke to the press today about this and had some pretty good words of wisdom about this. And is this Trump's Benghazi? This is what the Democrats are floating, which is stunning to me because that means they're actually admitting that Benghazi was a Benghazi. So that's fascinating. We'll get to that and much more. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Yes, this is Orlando Smart Talk Radio, Beyond Reason Radio. We're on until 10 p.m. tonight. We're also on Facebook Live as well. Make sure to like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. You can also send me a friend request on Facebook or follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R. So, the General Kelly, the Chief of Staff, I think had enough about a lot of this controversy dealing with what Trump said or didn't say in a phone call to the widow. And he decided to speak to the press about it today. And I think he did a pretty good job. And he would know because his son also died in the field of battle. So he is a Gold Star family member himself. He came out, and he's very good at addressing these things without bluster. He's the opposite of Trump in a lot of ways. I guess that's why he's good for Trump. But he came out and talked about this. Tom Benson was able to find these cuts for me. Tom Benson, go ahead and play cut one that we have.
He knew what he was getting into by joining that 1%. He knew what the possibilities were because we're at war. And when he died, in the 4 cases we're talking about in Niger, my son's case in Afghanistan, when he died, he was surrounded by the best men on this earth, his friends. That's what the president tried to say to 4 families the other day. I was stunned when I came to work yesterday morning and brokenhearted at what I saw a member of Congress doing. A member of Congress who listened in on a phone call from the President of the United States to a young wife, and in his way tried to express that opinion. He's a brave man, a fallen hero. He knew what he was getting himself into because he enlisted. There's no reason to enlist. He enlisted. And he was where he wanted to be, exactly where he wanted to be, with exactly the people he wanted to be with when his life was taken. That was the message. That was the message that was transmitted. It stuns me that a member of Congress would have listened in on that conversation. Absolutely stuns me.
So, I will say this. If Trump himself would have come out and said something similar to that, it would have been much better than what Trump actually said. I mean, Trump was mad. I could just tell. He was mad that this is even a controversy. But he should have come out, maybe said, I'm sorry that you took it the wrong way. This is what I meant. Mm-hmm. That would have been much better. But I think what General Kelly said there, when I first heard about this whole controversy and I heard the so-called comment that Trump said, the first thing that I thought of is exactly what he said there, what General Kelly said there. That's what I interpreted it as immediately in my mind.
It wasn't a callous remark. It was a comforting remark.
Yeah, that's how I would interpret something like that. That, yeah, he was brave. He knew what he signed up for. And that's probably what Trump meant. I don't think Trump would have meant it any callous way. And I don't think anybody who's honest with themselves would have believed the same thing. So John Kelly. Oh, and speaking of why the congresswoman was listening into the phone call, I'm not sure I buy a lot of that criticism, to be honest, because the widow was the one who chose to put her on speaker. Mm-hmm. So. And John Kelly was also listening. So if she can't listen, then he shouldn't have been listening. That's actually a fair criticism. What is stunning to me, though, is how this has all been politicized, that she had to come out and make this all politicized. It's just, I don't know, it's crazy. So go ahead and play. He continued on with this, said a lot about this, but go ahead and play the second cut for me, Tom Benson, of John Kelly.
A casualty officer typically goes to the home very early in the morning and waits for the first lights to come on. And then he knocks on the door. Typically the mom and dad will answer, the wife. And if there is a wife, this is happening in 2 different places. If the parents are divorced, 3 different places. And the casualty officer proceeds to break the heart of a family member and stays with that family until for a long, long time, even after the internment. So that's what happens. Who are these young men and women? They are the best 1% this country produces. Most of you, as Americans, don't know them. Many of you don't know anyone who knows any one of them. But they are the very best this country produces. And they volunteer to protect our country when there's nothing in our country anymore that seems to suggest that selfless service to the nation is not only appropriate but required.
So he went over what happens when Gold Star families are notified. He went over the fact that these are the bravest of us. Nothing requires them to do that, which goes back to Trump's original comments. They know what they signed up for. And I thought it was very moving. I thought that was the appropriate thing to say in response to all this. So I found another story very interesting too from CBS News. Slain soldier's father recounts his conversation with Trump. So Trump not only called this widow, but called the families of the other soldiers that were killed over there in Niger. And Trump called this father. And according to him, everything in the conversation was fine. It was exactly what you would expect. Arnold Wright, father of Staff Sergeant Dustin Wright, one of the 4 U.S. soldiers killed in Niger, told CBS News his recent phone call with President Trump went well. He talked with President about his son and the need for air support in that region of the world. Wright recalled his Tuesday afternoon conversation with the president. And Mr. Trump comes under fire for his conversation with the widow. He talked about this, yada, yada, yada. There's some criticism that he took too long, but Wright said Mr. Trump was cordial and listened as he talked. And I've heard reports of this before. There's been other reports of, when he visited the victims of Vegas or he visited the victims of the hurricanes, and the people said Trump was very cordial in those situations. Mm-hmm. Was very nice, was willing to listen, was very attentive. So, that's why the phone call thing was so, beyond reason to me, that he was insensitive, because it goes against everything else I've seen when he does stuff like this. Mr. Wright said he offered his condolences, and then I talked for probably 20-minute phone call. And I probably talked for 17 minutes of it, he said, of the 20 minutes. Said, I talked about Dustin, and I told him he needed to be aware that if he has teams in the country, they need air support. He was not aware of the situation, Wright added. And obviously, Trump wouldn't be aware of all of the details necessarily.
They did have air support, by the way. They were from French jets.
Well, yes, and then there's some controversy. I guess the medevac helicopters, they originally reported it was a military, but it might have been a military contractor. Mm-hmm. There are some questions that need to be asked about this whole controversy. But, that happens. It's called, like you said before in the show, Fog of War.
Well, look what happened, 3-4 weeks ago now in Las Vegas. We still don't have all the answers. And here they are over in the middle of Africa with limited communications. It takes time for these things to come out.
Yeah. I mean, it does. That doesn't mean we shouldn't ask the questions.
Right.
I mean, John McCain's saying we're not getting enough answers on this. That's fine. But then you have Frederica Wilson, again, making another comment about all of this and trying to spin this in a different direction now. So going away from the Gold Star family, she made another comment. And I actually have the audio, Tom Benson, if you can get that ready for me, of Wilson saying what's the real story here about this whole attack in Niger. Do you have it ready? This is what she said.
But what he needs to be doing is watching, because this is his Benghazi. See, La David was separate from the rest of the group for 2 days, 48 hours. Why? Was he kidnapped? Why did those soldiers not have armored trucks? Why did they have weapons that were less than Boko Haram and ISIS? Why were they not protected? How were they able to be overrun by terrorists when they're there to train the army? They didn't go there to fight. This is Mr. Trump's Benghazi, and all of this about the widow is just a cover-up.
Okay. First off, like I said, it's stunning to me that they're saying that she's saying this is Trump's Benghazi. They wouldn't admit Obama was Obama's Benghazi. They wouldn't admit that there was a problem there at all.
That's right.
So now all of a sudden they're admitting there was a problem in Benghazi, but this is now Trump's Benghazi. So that's stunning to me. The second thing is the end of that. She said this whole widow thing is a cover-up. You're the one who brought that up. You're the one who brought up the whole widow thing, Representative Wilson. So how can it be a cover-up when you're the one who started all this? That makes no sense. Third, this whole idea, the reason Benghazi was a scandal to begin with was because they lied. The Obama administration lied about it in the beginning. That's why it was a scandal. They lied about it, saying it was a video, wouldn't admit that it was a terrorist attack. That's why it was a problem, not because we didn't have all the information. Of course, we have to have an investigation. And some of her questions in that, I have to agree, are good questions. I want to know the answers to some of those things. I was reading a little bit of what happened. Apparently, according to NBC News, the special forces were there on a mission to get supplies and talk. They were going out to their vehicles, and they were ambushed by a bunch of militants. They think possibly, most likely, these were ISIS militants or Boko Haram, the militants in that area. And they were ambushed, and eventually he got separated, and they thought maybe he was kidnapped, but they found his body later. There are still some unanswered questions, and I will agree with that. But then, but to say this is Trump's Benghazi, I haven't seen Trump really try to cover any of this up. I mean, I haven't noticed anything like that. There's some kind of active cover-up here. I don't think that's in Trump's interest. And then another Florida Republican who sits on the House Armed Services Committee, U.S. Representative Matt Gaetz, said this in response to what Wilson said there. Said in Benghazi, you had U.S. fighter jets sitting in Crete that could have been there very quickly. Here we did not have U.S. capabilities that were freezing in place. It's not like that in Central Africa. He says in Niger, he says U.S. Special Forces were trying to keep a light footprint as to not draw attention as they equipped and trained local forces to combat terrorists chased out of North Africa. As a result, he said the soldiers were exposed because of the dangerous nature of the mission. He says, when you've got Americans in a zone where there's really little command and control, it's a highly volatile environment. It's not atypical to begin these types of operations by having our high-intensity special operators, the Green Berets, the Navy SEALs, their air commandos, and then over time increase our capabilities. In Central Africa, it is important that we maintain low visibility in some cases. And having a massive extraction force in the region doesn't always facilitate low visibility. That's usually why you send in the Green Berets and the Navy SEALs, because you want low visibility and you don't want to. They're the ones who go in before when you don't have all these resources. That's why you send them in the first place. So I'm not saying some of her questions aren't valid, but to immediately try to change the subject and say this is Trump's Benghazi, I don't buy it. I don't think this is the same thing at all. So there you go. We have a lot more to get to in the show today, so we will. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Beyond Reason Radio continues now.
So last week I read a story from Conservative Review that talked about how the GOP, under the GOP in 2017, the government has actually increased spending by $130 billion. And how this is just so annoying to me because these Republicans They run on being fiscal conservatives. They run on cutting spending. They run all this. So it's the whole purpose of putting them in Congress was to stop this massive spending, and yet we seem to go in the same direction no matter who's in there. And they run on that. So right now they're trying to move forward with the budget, and Rand Paul made an announcement from Capitol Hill yesterday talking about that he will vote to move forward with the debate on the budget, but he does not support what's going on with the budget and spending in Washington. This is, go and play cut one for me, Tom Benson of Rand Paul.
Today we've decided to move on to considering the budget, and I decided to vote yes on moving forward to the budget after talking with the president this morning, this weekend, and again this afternoon. He's very appreciative of me voting to move on to the budget. I've told him, though, that I can't vote for the budget if it exceeds the spending caps. So we have these caps in place that are supposed to try to help us be fiscally responsible here. But the problem is you've got people like John McCain and Lindsey Graham who perennially are asking us to exceed the caps, and that's why we wind up with a $20 trillion debt. And so, frankly, the people that are torpedoing this and endangering the budget vote are, frankly, Lindsey Graham and John McCain. I've said if they will adhere to what we say we are for, we as Republicans say we are for these budget caps. If we'll say and do what we say we're for, I'll vote for the budget. But if we're not going to be conservative, I can't vote for it. One other item in the budget that I think is an important one that no one's talking about. In the budget, in the first year, they say they're going to achieve $96 billion worth of entitlement savings. So if you are to achieve $96 billion in entitlement spending, you would think there should be a bill, or there should be reconciliation instructions, there should be a plan. So I think what we need to ask Republicans who are for this budget, what's your plan for saving the $96 billion in year one that makes your budget balance in 8 years? So my question is, are they serious, or is it just a game? I think to many of them it's a game and a charade, and they say budget doesn't mean anything, it's a vehicle for cutting taxes, we don't care what's in it, which is what they say until we ask them to actually make it a more fiscally conservative document, and then they refuse because we have too many Republicans who basically are not fiscally conservative.
So a couple of points he makes there. And by the way, this to me, I guess, is one of my voices of reason of the day. He's my voice of reason a lot when it comes to spending. But one thing I have to sympathize with him in the fact that I just read a story about how Republicans keep increasing spending. And yet they want to pass a budget that basically increases spending. They want to go over the budget caps by putting the money into a separate account because Lindsey Graham and McCain basically want more military spending, and we can't seem to get cuts in other places to make up for the increased military spending. So that's a good point. But he also makes a really interesting point at the end there. The whole reason And I know some of this is kind of confusing, and honestly, I think it's meant to be confusing. I think it's meant to confuse the American people so the American people aren't aware what's really going on with the massive out-of-control spending. But he makes the point that, well, and he's right, the Republicans really just want to put forward this budget. It really doesn't matter what's in this budget proposal because it's still, each spending area has to be approved by Congress later, and it could change and yada, yada, yada. We just have to get something done now so we can have reconciliation for tax reform. And in fact, I was reading an article in Forbes earlier that said basically the same thing, that if Rand Paul really wants lower taxes, he needs to vote for this budget to get it over with and move on to tax reform. But then he pointed out, well, if the budget really doesn't mean anything, then why don't we make it fiscally conservative? Like, if the budget really doesn't mean what they're saying it, then why, when someone like Rand Paul wants to make it fiscally conservative, wants to keep spending or cut spending, make it lower, why then does everyone get outraged by that if it doesn't mean anything? Because it does mean something. And I think he's right. A lot of this is a game. These Republicans, they get in Congress, they say they're for cutting spending, yet it doesn't seem to happen. We can barely cut the rate of increase, and usually we can't even do that. So I have to sympathize with Rand Paul here. Now, I believe I have another cut of Rand Paul, right? Go ahead and play cut 2 for me, Tom Benson. He continues on talking about the other Republicans.
No, they push every year, and they have been for the past decade, at spending money that's above the caps. They do it all the time. It's the Overseas Contingency Fund. So the OCO account is basically a way to evade the caps. It's intellectually dishonest. It's fiscally liberal. It is what is pushing on the increase in our debt, and it's done by John McCain and Lindsey Graham. So they're the ones pushing that we're going to evade the caps with OCO money. So the $43 billion that exceeds the caps, technically you're right. You can say, oh, we're going to adhere to the caps. They will. And yet then they'll put $43 billion in some account they just don't count as going against the caps. But I think that's a game and dishonest.
So, and I agree with them. But I just want to point this out. I bet you, did anyone know that this was happening? I bet most people listening to me right now, or most people in this country, have no idea what the heck he's talking about. What do you mean that they can go around the budget and put money on a separate account so it's not counted on the budget so they can spend more?
It's like an escrow account that no one knows anything about.
I mean, and they did this, to fight the war on terror, I guess, and to have extra military. But I mean, it's just, when you hear stuff like that, it seems like a game. It just seems like, wait, what? I can't get away with that. If I have a budget, I can't just magically have more money put in somewhere else, and a business couldn't get away with that. But the government gets away with this all, so they put forward these budgets, and we say, look, we're cutting spending, but we just have all this other money in this other account. Adding to the list of why Trump won, this is the kind of stuff, people are sick of this. They feel like they're being played. And I think we are. So they play all these games about how they're fiscally conservative, cutting the spending, cutting the budget, and then they put a bunch of money into another account or whatever, and then the debt keeps going up, and we're like, really? And that's why people get sick of politicians, get sick of Washington as usual, because it's just nonsense. Now, another thing I want to talk about here is there are some people out there that believe the Rand Pauls of the world, the Ted Cruzes of the world, the Mike Lees of the world are too unwilling to compromise. They're too strict on their principles, and that's not how Congress should work. It has to be a transaction. We have to compromise. And they don't like that. That's how you have to give some and get some and all that stuff.
We don't see the other side giving anything, though.
Well, and that's the thing. And Ted Cruz pointed out that compromise is fine as long as we're moving in the right direction. And some say, I don't understand. Compromise should mean both move in the right direction. No, what happens is this is what the compromise usually looks like. The Republicans, like Ted Cruz, want to cut spending. The Democrats want to increase spending. So what do? We increase spending, but not as much. That's usually what the compromise looks like. Some people think it should be like a transaction. So when you go to a restaurant, you give them money and they give you food. You look at the options for food, you give them money, They give you food, and that's the compromise. But what if you go to the restaurant and you don't like any of the options? What if you go to the restaurant and none of the food in that restaurant is good? Am I forced to compromise with that restaurant? Because compromise is good by giving my money and getting food I don't like? No. I go to another restaurant because I don't like any of the options there. So that's why I kind of support what the Ted Cruzes and the Rand Pauls and the Mike Lees do a lot of the time. People think they're too strict. No, they're just sick of the options being thrown at us. We need better options, and we need to start moving in the right direction. And I think Rand Paul is right there as well. 407-916-5400. You can text to 23680. You can also comment on the Facebook Live feed as well at Beyond Reason Radio. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
It would be beyond reason not to listen to Yaffee on your TuneIn Radio app. Download the app today and search Beyond Reason Radio. The conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffee is back on the air.
Yes, welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We are on until 10 p.m. tonight right here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. You're definitely going to want to stay with us for the next hour because I want to get into a little bit of the debate between Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders on taxes. I didn't get to watch the whole thing live, but I saw some highlights, and it was pretty good, pretty interesting. So we'll get to that. And also, George W. Bush has somehow come out of the woodwork, and he's making some comments. You know, he was silent for 8 years under Obama, but he seems to be out there making some comments as well. So we'll get to that. Plus, you can also call 407-916-5400. Text to 23680 on anything that we have talked about so far. So I found, I hear a lot of stories about how the Republican Party is split, the Republican Party is fractured, the Republican Party can't seem to unite on anything. And this is different from the Democrats. They say the Democrats are always united. But I wonder if that's really true. And this is why. I found a story from Vox.com. Now, Vox is a liberal publication. So when you're talking about what the Democrats are up to, you might want to go to Vox. This is what the headline says. Democrats' test of party unity is off to a rocky start. It says a handful of longtime Sanders allies are upset with a big DNC decision, but others aren't. I just found this interesting because I think, a lot of people think the Republicans are in for a really tough 2018, and they probably are. But we hear about the divisions in the Republican Party a lot. But there are definitely some divisions in the Democrat Party, too. The Democrats are having to deal with this as well. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that politics is changing. More people are becoming independents. Millennials are not really they don't care about the parties as much and stuff like that. That's a big part of this. So the parties don't know what to do with all of this. So you have the Republicans that are sort of divided between, there are almost three different parts now. You have the Tea Party conservatives, the Trumpers, and then the establishment.
The problem with being an independent is that in a lot of states you can't vote in the primary.
Well, yeah,
there are some where you can, but most I would think you can't.
I kind of think that's the way it should be. Because if I'm a Republican, I don't want a bunch of Democrats voting in my primary and choosing candidate for me.
Mm-hmm.
But, that creates a whole bunch of other issues.
But then you're left with the candidates that somebody else decides and you had no say in.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. Then you would have to convince the country to vote for somebody other than the two main candidates, which is very hard to do because the system has been in place for a long time.
Right.
But I just think it's interesting that I'm reading here from Vox that the Democrat Party is also having a lot of problems, that they're also split. A lot of it has to do with the socialists like Bernie Sanders, the real progressives, and the Democrats, the Biden Democrats, who are like, we're losing a lot of our core votes now to Trump because of this.
Yeah, the establishment, if you will.
Yeah, the establishment Democrats.
Yes.
Oh, that's a good point. Here's the story from Vox. It says, after Obama ally Tom Perez won a bitter battle for control of the DNC this winter, he vowed to unify both parties' traditional wing and Bernie Sanders' ascendant left-wing movement. Perez is now getting a crucial test of that pledge ahead of upcoming party gathering in Las Vegas. He will announce his nominations to the body of DNC, as well as his picks for key committee jobs, yada, yada, yada. Now, they got a list of all the people that are going to be a part of it. But some longtime allies of both Bernie Sanders and Ellison argue that the new DNC chair should have done more to include members of the party's left flank, and in particular criticize the decision to put what they view as allies of the party's old guard in key positions. This is exactly what happened during the Democrat primary. You had the DNC, who really, which we all know, through Debbie Wasserman Schultz, wanted Hillary to win. They wanted the old guard to win. They wanted the establishment side to win. And you had the Bernie Sanders crowd who was not happy about this, really trying to push Bernie Sanders. It didn't work in the end. But this shows to me the Democrats have a big split too. Because you have the radical left that's gaining more and more and more and more traction in the Democrat Party. And you have the Bidens of the world, the Hillarys of the world, who are like, if we keep doing this, and I think they're right, if we keep going more and more and more to the left, we're already pretty left, but if we keep going socialist left, we're going to lose a lot of our blue-collar, middle-class, white voters to people like Trump.
And throwing a monkey wrench in everything is the generation gap. Look at your establishment candidates in both parties. They are getting older and older,
Yeah.
And it's hard to relate to somebody who's 40, 45 years old.
Well, I mean, when you think about the future of the Democrat Party too, who in the world do they have to run in 2020? Biden? How old is he? 70s?
Yeah, got to be in the 70s, sure.
Sanders? He's in his late 70s, I think. He's in great shape, though, for his 70s, I think. I don't know. He seems all right.
It's that socialized medicine that's keeping him going.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. What else? Who else do they have? Elizabeth Warren?
Please.
Some think Hillary's going to run again. They're throwing out Katherine Harris, who I guess is younger, but they only like her because she's a minority and a woman. So it's the identity politics thing again. And Cory Booker's another one. He's a black male, more of the identity politics. They think that's their winning strategy. And it's funny, to campaign for some new candidates coming up in 2018, you know who they're sending in? Obama. So they think Obama's the only one that's going to be able to bring the party back. I just found that very interesting. We talk about the divisions in the Republican Party, but the Democrats, don't let them fool you. They have some divisions to work out as well. All right, in the next hour, we're going to talk about George W. is back. Oh, what's he saying? Much more. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. One more hour to go.
That nothing comes from indifference. I look inside of myself.
So it is 2017, right? It's not 2004 or 5. It's 2017, right?
Correct. It still is.
Just checking. I'm making sure I didn't go back in time. The main reason I bring this up is because George W. Bush, yes, you heard me right. George W. Bush, former President George W. Bush, who, I liked. For the most part, I didn't agree with everything he did, but I think he truly loves the country. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He truly loves the country. He's back. He's back in the news, and he made a speech, and we're going to play some of it. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We are on till 10 p.m. tonight here on WFLA. If you missed any of the show, though, you can catch the podcast anywhere that podcasts are available. So, and of course we have Mr. Tom Benson, who's producing as well. How are you, Tom?
Still here. I am fine. Thank you very much.
All right. Good deal. If you have any comments, you can call 407-916-5400, or you can text to 23680. So Trump gave us, or not Trump, President George W. Bush gave a speech today in New York. And a lot of people think that his speech, and this was at the George W. Bush Institute, which I didn't even know existed. Have you ever been to the George W. Bush Institute there? Tom Benson?
Not this year. No,
not. So, but he gave a speech, and a lot of people think that this was a bash at Trump, that this was a swipe at Trump. There's no doubt about it. This shows that he hates Trump. So I'm going to play some of the highlights here and see what you think. Was this really directed towards Trump? Here it is. Go ahead and play George W. Bush for me.
Mobility seems out of reach. The American dream of upward mobility seems out of reach for some who feel left behind in a changing economy. Discontent deepened and sharpened partisan conflicts. Bigotry seems emboldened. Our politics seems more vulnerable to conspiracy theories and outright fabrication. Argument turns too easily into animosity. Disagreement escalates into dehumanization. Too often we judge other groups by their worst examples, while judging ourselves by our best intentions. Our identity as a nation, unlike many other nations, is not determined by geography or ethnicity, by soil or blood. We become the heirs of Martin Luther King Jr. by recognizing one another not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. This means that people of every race, religion, ethnicity can be fully and equally American. It means that bigotry or white supremacy in any form is blasphemy against the American creed.
So a lot of people think that that's bashing Trump personally. Now, he never mentioned Trump by name in the speech. I don't really think that was necessarily bashing Trump altogether. There might be some things that he doesn't like with Trump when he talked about nationalism. When he said this, we've seen nationalism distorted into nativism, forgetting the dynamism that immigration has always brought to America. That might be kind of a swipe at Trump and immigration policy. But a lot of what Bush said there, for one, I agree with. Mm-hmm. You know, he talks about our discourse. You know, it's getting ugly.
It's the social and civil war that he's talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He talked about bigotry. He did talk about, you know, white supremacists. Trump's not a white supremacist. I think a lot of what George W. Bush was saying there was really directed at both sides, was really directed at political debate in general, not necessarily directed just towards Trump. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying he didn't include Trump in some of what he was saying, but I don't think everything he was saying was just, this is just a, you know, CNN, of course, has a headline that this is just a total swipe at Trump. But he said a lot more than just stuff that has to do with Trump. Like we played there, he talked about the divisions in America on both sides. That goes way beyond Trump. That's way beyond anything Trump does or Trump supporters or anything like that. I'm gonna take a phone call in a sec, but I do want to play. Karl Rove had a comment. He was on with Dana Perino. Dana Perino also worked for the Bush administration. Karl Rove obviously worked for the Bush administration, and they talked about it on her show. And he also said that this wasn't really focused towards Trump. This is what he said.
People very interested, I guess, today that the president and Mrs. Bush came to New York for the Spirit of Liberty event. But this was planned well over a year ago, before the election ever took place. So when I heard his speech today, I was like, wow, this is the kind of themes that I've heard him talk about since I've been following him for the last, 16 years. But some are taking it as swipes at either President Trump or President Obama. What say you?
I'm with you. This is planned over a year ago. These are things that he's talked about before. He thought it was important to bring these issues up now to remind people of the importance of a strong America, strong defense, strong alliances in the world. But the people who are talking about this as being an attack on this or that public figure are just looking to make a food fight where no food fight exists.
I think there's a lot of truth there. That they want to, what he says, they want to make a food fight where no food fight exists. I have another point on this, though. It's a criticism towards George W. Bush. But before we get to that, I want to take a call here. Let's go to Bob in Longwood. Bob, what do you think about all this?
Well, when I looked at it, Bush is saying the Russians are dividing this country. The Russians are not dividing this country. Who divided this country is Obama. Now all of a sudden, Bush is coming out after 8 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't he come out before this and say anything? Why? Because he'd be called a racist. But now he's coming out. But no.
See, and this.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that's the point that I was going to bring up. That you make an excellent point there. That my biggest problem with what George W. Bush did here is where was he for the past 8 years? He would always say that, well, after a president leaves office, it's not really his position to criticize politics and other presidents, and that's not really what they should do after they leave office. So he didn't do that for 8 years when Obama was dividing the country. And now all of a sudden Obama's gone and Trump's in, and now all of a sudden he's speaking up. Where has he been?
That's right. And not only that, the media is dividing this country.
Well, yeah.
The media is the worst weapon in this country. They're trying to use people. They're dividing this country. But thank you, Michael. You have a good evening.
All right. Thanks, man. It's not just media. It's social media. I think the Russians are trying to divide the country, too. I agree with what George Bush was saying there. I'm not a nationalist. There is too much nationalism. But he also talked about bigotry. I think there is too much bigotry in this country on both sides, frankly. But, there's too much division. Discourse. You can't talk about things anymore. These are all issues that I have been bringing up forever that I agree with. Now, another thing that's beyond reason about all of this is I saw headlines too from like CNN and other places. All of a sudden the Democrats are talking about how they miss George W. Bush. CNN had a thing said this is what a real president sounds like.
Really?
Yes.
When he was president, they were calling him a goofball.
Exactly. It's like I'm reading all this stuff. Let's see. Nancy Pelosi said something. Nancy Pelosi said this about Mitt Romney. So they're also saying it about Mitt Romney. They said, wouldn't it be nice? She asked if Mitt Romney were president of the United States. And a lot of people are saying that George W. Bush is back, and they love him again for his speech. Now they love Mitt Romney, and they love George W. Bush.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm thinking, I was there. I was alive. It wasn't that long ago. I was alive when Bush was in office, and I remember all of the crazy things that they would say about them. Remember, Bush lied, people died.
And for the first 4 years of the Obama administration, everything was blamed on George Bush.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Obama constantly blamed George Bush for everything. They called him a goofball, a cowboy, inept. Doesn't he know what he doesn't know what he's doing? Hollywood made a W movie that made him look like a bumbling idiot and all. I mean, we heard it all. And Dick Cheney is Darth Vader. All of this stuff. They hated him. They said he is a war criminal, and now they love him. And I'm supposed to be like, oh, okay. This happened. I mean, this always happens. The guy who's in office is always worse than they get off. And it's like, oh, it wasn't that bad. But I mean,
it's the spin they want to put on things to further their own agenda.
Yeah, exactly right. It's just, whatever. It's just the craziest thing. It's like really, we were there It wasn't that long ago. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. We're going to talk about Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders had a debate on CNN last night. And I actually this is one thing that I like that CNN is doing. They're doing these debates between, Republicans and Democrats on policy things like taxes. They did a debate on Obamacare. I think they've been doing town halls with like Paul Ryan and stuff like that. I mean, that's actually a decent thing. We're actually talking about policy, debating policy. It's what we should be doing. It's what CNN should be doing. So if you want to give them any credit ever, that's one thing that I don't mind. And it was actually a pretty good debate. So we're going to talk about, I know people are going to text, how can you give them any credit ever? They're the devil, yada, yada, yada. I know they're biased. I don't like them either. But I'm just saying I do appreciate these debates. So we'll talk about that next. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Download the iHeartRadio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast. The place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
Yes, welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. You can call 407-916-5400 or text to 23680 if you have any comments. We have Tom Benson in the control and producing as well. And we have a couple of calls. We were talking about former President George W. Bush, who made a speech today, and everyone's saying, well, he was talking directly about Trump. I think there might have been a little bit of that, but I think he was making statements that go beyond Trump, big picture statements that go beyond Trump and talk about the state of politics in our country today. And then, of course, the Democrats are saying, well, I miss him. He was a great president. You certainly didn't think that when he was in office. So very interesting. Let's take some calls here. We got Paula and Lake Mary. Paula, how are you tonight?
Well, I'm doing quite well, thank you. I couldn't help but to think that it just seems to me that Republicans in the past have been, regardless of whether they were presidents or other politicians, they just kind of take all the garbage that's dished out, and it's pretty vicious, but has never been quite as vicious as recently with Trump. And Trump pushes back. Well, then here comes George Bush, and I guess he took all the nastiness that they had to heap on him, and he didn't say a word like a good little Republican. And now he comes out and makes comments that probably, were to some degree directed at Trump, it appeared like. So now they like him, and now they can hold up, as they have many times before, any Republican or conservative who has spoken out against or appeared to have spoken out against Trump. And it makes them feel virtuous and validated and stronger. See, even these people that we had all this, they had no respect for him. They were nasty. They were ugly.
Of course they were.
Not near as bad as with Trump.
Yeah, it's definitely worse now.
Yeah, and Bush took it the way that every other Republican has, and so they get a pat on the head, and now they're part of the validation.
So basically what you're saying is the Democrats are not used to someone fighting back.
Exactly, and they have never seen, and I will also say this, I mean, there's times that I kind of cringe a little bit with some of the things that Trump says, not because he's wrong, but because I know what it will invite. And yet I have so much respect for him, as do a lot of Americans, and you're seeing it and hearing it now, that finally somebody's standing up and saying no.
Well, I think that's a big reason why he was elected, because he was willing to fight back. Paula, great call. I think you actually make an excellent point. I don't mind Trump fighting back. I just kind of wish he would be better at it sometimes. That's my only take. Let's take another call here. Let's go to Keith in Winter Garden. Keith, how are you tonight?
Hey, pretty good, Michael. How you doing?
Pretty good. Just glad to take your call.
Yeah. Hey, listen. Don't let the Democrats and CNN and all those liars of life sink the hook on you, man. I wouldn't trust CNN for as far as I could throw the building. And the reality is,
I don't really either.
No, I know, but here's the problem. The problem is that the Democrats literally, because they have no solutions, thereby have no identity. So if they can go ahead and bring some conservatives on and a liberal on, and they're trying to brand themselves as a party of reason and the party of conservatism, or at least middle of the road, and they're trying to rebrand themselves. And of course, with people like George W., because George W. nor Romney were conservative.
If they're trying to rebrand themselves, they're doing a terrible job. But go ahead.
No, I know that, but this is their next phase of trying to get people to think that they are more center left rather than far left, and don't buy into it. The American people need to wake up and just discount CNN as the garbage fake news network that they really truly are.
All right, thank you, Keith. I appreciate it. I mean, Tom, you and I were watching it before the show today, and yeah, it's hard to to get anything else out of it that they're biased against Republicans and Trumps. And
to think that goes on 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Yeah. But I mean, I do like the debates. That was all I was saying. I like the debates. Let's continue on. Let's go to Larry in New Smyrna. Larry, what's your take on all this?
Yes, thank you. I enjoy your show. Once a week I drive from New Smyrna to Lake Mary to teach math at Seminole State College, and I enjoy your show when I'm coming back.
Oh, I appreciate that. You said you teach math?
Yeah, I'm a retired dentist, 31 years, and my dad was a math teacher, and so now I teach freshman algebra, Seminole State, and I love it.
Cool.
What I was going to say is I'm 68. I was elected twice to the school board as a Republican in Brevard County, so I've been into politics a little bit.
All right.
In 1998, I read in the paper where the big money Republicans were coming out behind George W. Bush. I'm a great admirer of Bush the Elder, his father.
Uh-huh.
And I'm an admirer of Jeb Bush. I thought he was a great governor.
Okay.
But I'm not an admirer of George W. Bush.
Really?
He seems to be a good guy, but we should have elected his wife, you know what I'm saying. Anyway,
Laura Bush?
There were so many talented Republicans that could have run in that 2000 election.
Like who?
Well, I can't recall at this point, but there were, because I can remember contemplating it. George W. Bush would not have made my top 10, if you understand what I'm saying.
Gotcha. I mean, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It's just, how old was I? I mean, I was in high school when that happened, so I don't remember as much.
Iraq and Iran had been at war for decades and decades and decades. That was the best possible situation for us. Iraq and Iran at war with each other. The one who disrupted that, turned the whole thing upside down, was George W. Bush. Now, I say that.
Now, how did he disrupt that? By invading Iraq?
He invaded Iraq.
I thought the Iraq-Iran war ended before that, though.
He'll go down as one of the worst presidents in history. There's no question about it, and deservedly so.
For invading Iraq?
Oh, absolutely. Can you imagine Iraq and Iran? They were at war for decades and decades and decades, leaving us alone. You understand what I'm saying? Oh, what a mess. But anyway, I don't think his speech today was anti-Trump. I know he didn't write it because he couldn't spell all the words. But anyway.
So it's obvious you're not a fan of George W. Bush. That is what I'm gathering here.
Okay? I would love to go running with him, biking with him, whatever. But him as our president was a bad joke in the year 2000, and it's still a bad joke. You know?
So what do you think of Trump?
Oh, I'm a big Trump backer. Absolutely. I mean, under Hillary, we would have continued to go straight downhill.
No doubt about that.
Trump, you can't listen to what he says, but you have to watch what he does.
You know, that is a brilliant point. That really is, because you are exactly right. If you just pay attention to the bluster, you just pay attention to the tweet, you just pay attention to what he says, yeah, it creates problems. But you look at what he does. He puts Gorsuch on the Supreme Court. He did an executive order last week to expand affordable health care. He got rid of those Obamacare subsidies that were unconstitutional. Stock market's going up, economic opportunities going up. He's decreasing regulations and all of that stuff. It's hard to, when you look behind the scenes at what he's actually doing. We've defeated ISIS in Syria now. I mean, it's hard not to like what he's doing.
since day one when he was in the White House, he's just done one wonderful thing after another. He has said some horrible things, but he does wonderful things. He inherited a mess. I mean, there are all kinds of problems that don't have obvious answers. But look at Madison, Tillerson, and his cabinet. Oh, my God. If we had a chance, I think Trump gives us the best chance to survive.
Wow.
I mean, the $20 trillion debt, $100 trillion unfunded liability.
Yeah, see, this is my biggest criticism with Trump, though. I don't see him serious about cutting spending.
About cutting spending?
Yeah. I mean, do you disagree with that? Or
it's really hard, almost impossible, being a math teacher, to cut spending and lower taxes at the same time. You understand what I mean?
Oh, I mean, you would have to cut spending in order. Well, I mean, you would have to do one or the other first.
Once you get it going, and the economy is booming, okay. I mean, he has to cut whole departments, like the Department of Education, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's going to take major cutting, and he's smart. He's a businessman. He understands that if we don't do that, we're going down the tubes.
All right, Larry, I appreciate your call. I mean, really, if anyone's been listening to me for a while, I have not been the biggest Trump fan and everything, but a lot of what he does is good. What he's done, he's cracked down on illegal immigration, that's gone down. Like I said, ISIS, the economy's doing much better. But it's behind the scenes, he does okay. If he could just shut his mouth every once in a while, I think we'd be in a better situation. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. We're going to get into this debate between Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you like Beyond Reason Radio, well, make sure to show it by liking the Facebook page at facebook.com/Beyond Reason Radio. Your safe space for conservative thought, not for political correctness. Yaffee is back right now.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee. We are on till 10 p.m., so 1/2 hour to go. Had a lot of calls in the last half hour, so that was good. If you want to call, you can call 407-916-5400. So Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders, they debated, I think it was a few months ago, on healthcare on CNN. So now, last night, they debated on taxes. And I wanted to play some of the highlights of that, and also a cut that I really liked from Ted Cruz, where he, schooled Bernie Sanders on something that I've been saying for a long time, and other conservatives have been saying for a long time. So, I mean, Ted Cruz is a good debater. There's no doubt about that. He always has been. He was even good in the primaries, even though he lost. So, there you go. But let's play a little bit of some of the exchanges between Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders.
One of the things I like about debating Bernie is he's honest. When he ran in Vermont, he ran as a socialist, an unabashed socialist.
No, I ran as an independent, longest-serving independent in the history of the United States Congress.
Are you a socialist or not?
I am a democratic socialist, similar to the folks. Okay. But don't tell them I didn't run as a socialist. I ran as an independent. You told people you were a socialist. Fine.
You
didn't run as a right-winger. You ran as a Republican, right?
I am happily a conservative.
Okay, all right. Stop right there. I really don't understand this exchange. It's weird to me. I mean, he goes, you ran as a socialist. He's like, no, I did not. I ran as an independent. It's like, but I mean, okay, yeah, technically you did, but you ran as someone who believes in democratic socialism. That's what Ted Cruz is getting at. This is just a very weird exchange. He's like, you didn't run as a white ringer. Well, no, but he did run as a conservative Republican as well. It's just a weird, I don't know. It's just a very strange exchange. I didn't really understand that, but I wanted to play it for you. All right, he continues on here.
So Bernie ran telling the voters he was a socialist. And then in this last election, he ran in the Democratic Party. He almost won the Democratic Party's nomination. And if you didn't have super delegates and the corruption of the DNC, you probably would have been your party's nominee.
You're looking for a job as my campaign manager.
You know. But I'll say it was interesting. Right before the commercial break, when I said Bernie and the Democrats want to cut defense, cut the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and Marines. Bernie reacted and said, no, the Democrats don't. That's just me, Bernie. So it's interesting. Listen, I think today, I think the lesson the Democratic Party took from this election was Hillary Clinton was too moderate. And I think the Democratic Party is the party of you and Elizabeth Warren. But let me just ask, since this is a tax debate, what is the difference between a socialist and a Democrat on taxes?
Well, I don't know the answer to that because I don't know what other Democrats but here's what I think.
There is no
As
difference.
a democratic socialist, Ted, similar to the people in Denmark and Sweden and Norway and Finland, people who have, by and large, a much higher standard of living than we have, people who guarantee health care to all of their people as a right, where kids have free preschool education, where retirement benefits are much more generous in the United States. This is what I do believe, Ted. I believe that in a civilized society, people, especially those on top, should be asked to pay their fair share so that every man, woman, and child in our country can have a decent standard of living.
So Stop right there. Okay, so it's actually very educational on what Sanders believes and what socialists believe. So his measure of a society is not necessarily innovation. It's not necessarily economic output, economic growth. It's how much benefits people get from the government.
Yeah, right. It's the government taking care of the people.
Yeah, so if the government does a better job of taking care of the people and giving out more benefits to them, that to him is what makes a good society. Not, the economic driver of the world, which is the United States of America, not how much innovation and entrepreneurship that a country can create and how much economic growth and economic output a country can make. It's the benefits they get from that. And then, of course, he goes on to the whole rich don't pay their fair share thing. And this has been debunked over and over and over again. We have a progressive income tax code here. And when you look at just the standard income taxes, the rich pay the vast majority of the taxes in this country. Now, even if you add Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid taxes or payroll taxes, it's still, the rich are still paying more. The gap isn't as much, but the rich are still paying more of the taxes in this country, more on their fair share.
But what he says to the low information voter means something.
Well, because to him, they're not paying their fair share because they need to redistribute more of their wealth. Because they must have gotten that wealth in bad ways. They must have gotten that wealth by stealing.
On the back of the workers.
Exactly. And it's just economic ignorance. Now, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin got some flack earlier this week, even though he was right. He was saying he said earlier this week that it's really tricky to reform the tax code without delivering a windfall to the wealthy, without, having the wealthy get a big cut in taxes. Now, why is that? Because the wealthy pay the most of the taxes. And yet you have the bottom 40% that are almost getting more benefits than they are paying in. So when you have a tax code that works that way, anytime you put forward tax cuts, it's going to benefit the wealthy in a lot of ways because they're paying most of the taxes. The other thing is, and Republicans need to do a better job with this, Republicans don't want to cut taxes because they want to help the rich. It's not about that. It's about helping the economy. They know that cutting taxes, even for the people at the top, can drive investment, can drive job growth, and can help grow the economy for everyone. That's the message they need to put forward. The Republicans are so focused on, we're cutting for the middle class, and that's fine, and they need to do that. But they also need to show that cutting taxes creates economic growth. So even when you cut taxes at the top, because at the top, they're the ones creating the jobs, then that creates economic growth. All right, it continues on here.
We are the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. And Ted has got to explain why we have 28 million people without any health insurance, many more underinsured, and if he gets his way, another 15 million loses.
Okay, stop right there.
That's the end.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. I split it up. Yeah. So here's another thing. He admits we're the wealthiest nation in the world. Somebody should ask him why. Why are we the wealthiest nation in the world? Is that just coincidence? No, it's because we're not socialists. That's why. So he admits we're the wealthiest, but then we're, not enough people have health insurance. Well, the government's been involved in health insurance forever. We've talked about that endlessly on this show. So, more government isn't the solution, yada, yada, yada. All right, go ahead and play cut 2 for me.
We just witnessed a very important moment in this debate, which is that Bernie admitted that he wants to raise everyone's taxes. Not just the rich. The question was, to pay for this socialist state, you got to raise everyone's taxes. And Bernie said, yep, that's right. Your taxes are going up. That is a rare moment of candor in Washington. It's interesting, when I asked him the difference between a socialist and a Democrat on taxes, he couldn't tell me. I can't tell you either, because the Democratic Party today, the difference is Bernie admits his policies are socialist. Now, hold on, I didn't interrupt you, Bernie. Bernie likes to glorify socialism. But if you look at the greatest engine of prosperity the world has ever seen, it's the American free enterprise system. There is a reason millions of people risk their lives to come here. He talks about poverty. Yes, we have people who are suffering in this country, but it's worth noting that in the United States, per capita income in the United States is over 5 times greater than the world average, and it's 50% greater than Europe. There's a reason why my dad, coming out of prison and torture in Cuba, came here with $100 in his underwear, because, you go to socialized countries and you don't have the economic mobility. You got rich people that live like kings, but you don't have penniless immigrants who can go start a small business and work towards the American dream. And your answer is, let's make us like European socialism. I say, let's make us like American exceptionalism, free enterprise and opportunity for everybody.
So I thought Ted Cruz was right on there. I really liked everything he said. The reason why Bernie Sanders wants everybody's taxes to go up, because he believes a good society, a great society, is one where the government is giving out most of the benefits to the people. When you believe that, when the government is the one who should distribute wealth and should give out benefits to the people, then of course you're going to believe taxes, because he believes that's a good thing, that the government is better at it than the private sector. And this is the fundamental difference. Ted Cruz is saying, no, I don't want to be like a socialist country, because I don't believe the government is the best at that. I believe free people in a free economy are much better at creating and distributing wealth than the government. And I agree with them. So this last cut here, I'm just playing because I just really loved it, actually. And he's exactly right. I almost should add this to the Yaffee segment, but it didn't really make me laugh as much as it just made me happy, because it's just great stuff. Ted Cruz gives him a little bit of a lesson on Robin Hood. Here it is.
It's interesting. In his opening, Bernie invoked Robin Hood. And I got to say, I think Bernie fundamentally misunderstood that story. Robin Hood was robbing the tax collectors who were collecting too much taxes from the working men and women and taking it for the rich. In Bernie's analogy, it is the Democrats who are King John and the Sheriff of Nottingham. And Robin Hood is saying, tax collectors, stop hammering people who are struggling, who are laboring in the fields, who are working. Stop taking it to the castle to give out to your buddies. You notice Bernie's going to tell you all this free stuff he's going to give. And the Democrats love corporate welfare. They love to rail on the insurance companies. What they won't tell you is that under Obamacare, the profits for the insurance companies doubled. When you have Washington giving out goodies, the big guys do great. It's the little people who hurt. It's the young people. It's the entrepreneurs. Look, when my dad came to America from Cuba, he couldn't speak English. He was washing dishes. He was making 50 cents an hour. Our economy has been the place where people can come and do that. And it doesn't work. You notice, Bernie didn't disagree with what I said, that the gap between rich and poor has increased more under Obama than any president in history.
So there you go. The real story of Robin Hood that isn't said enough. Robin Hood wasn't taking from the rich to give to the poor. He was taking from the government to give the money back to the people. Very interesting. It's always something that's really bugged me about the whole Robin Hood analogy. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. We are going to end the show with things that made Yaffee Yaffee. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
You want to listen to Beyond Reason Radio live on your smartphone? Download the Beyond Reason Radio app now. Available in the Google Play or Apple App Stores. Your voice of truth in a world of fake news. Beyond Reason Radio continues right now.
Yes, this is Orlando Smart Talk Radio, your voice of truth in a world of fake news that is Beyond Reason. But we like to end the show with a little bit of fun. It is that time of the show once again, things that make Yaffee laughy. So I found this article. Let's see. I wonder if you would agree with this, Tom Benson. I kind of do. It's from The Federalist. Here's the headline. I don't care if it's Halloween. Your gruesome and tacky yard decorations are sick and rude. Says nothing will make me like your blow-up witch or haunted castle. Why can't people put a pile of pumpkins on their stoop and call it good? It's so true. I mean, it is crazy how weird decorations have gone in Halloween. You have Halloween lights now.
Yeah, I know.
Like Christmas lights, but Halloween lights. Like,
sure.
Really?
Yeah, and I also saw them advertising you can project scary scenes onto your windows.
I saw that too.
Oh, man.
It's just so much. It's by Georgie Boorman. She says, about halfway through October, I'm beset with a strong urge to become a totalitarian. Over the past 2 weeks, dozens of houses in my neighborhood have been draped in felt spiderwebs, obscured by giant inflatable witches. I hate inflatable decorations, by the way. I think they're all tacky and ugly. And liberally ornamented with shrunken heads, skeletons, and tattered ghosts. Like a werewolf under a full moon, I turn nastier when the ghouls that plague my quiet suburban development appear. Halloween decor make me want to band together with a bunch of petty conformists and start a homeowners association.
I was just going to say, makes you want to call HOA.
And she goes, and I hate HOAs. She says, sure, all our trim must be the exact shade of eggshell white, and we mustn't ever allow chicken coops, but at least my street would be free of Halloween-themed lawn garbage at last. It's such hatred for Halloween. I just think it's funny. My brother's one of these people, by the way, who loves decorating for Halloween.
Oh, sure. You know, it's fun. You know?
I guess, but I kind of agree with her that it gets a little overboard. She goes, don't get me wrong. Colorful gourds and straw scarecrows and leafy fall wreaths are adorable. I even smile at the occasional buck-toothed grin of a jack-o'-lantern, and I decorate the inside of my house for fall. But if my neighbors don't like my fake fall bouquets and the paper leaves I sprinkle on my mantle, they don't have to see them. They're inside my house. I'm not just hating on Halloween for its obvious pagan roots. You can make Christmas and Easter tacky too if you put a little effort into achieving the goal. But there is something sentimental and goofy about cheap Santa merchandise that, call me crazy, I don't think you get from a mutilated zombie statue. She says tagginess comes naturally to Halloween. What else would you expect from a modern secular holiday, the chief end of which is obtaining buckets full of mass-produced candy, getting the snot scared out of you, and snapping pictures of your ridiculous costumes, depending on your age? Halloween is a tacky holiday. She says, I'm not saying tacky can't be fun or that fun should never be tacky. Kids have loads of fun playing dress up and extorting candy from their neighbors. Babies look outrageously cute as flowers or strawberries or teddy bears. But there is nothing on this earth that will make me like your blow-up witch or haunted castle, and certainly no festive spirit that will make me appreciate the bloody decapitated doll you've hung from your front porch. She says the only thing worse than this horror show decor is putting said decor up a month before Halloween. I deliver groceries on the side, and people were doing it, mid-September.
Oh yeah,
it's just crazy. I agree with her completely. It's just annoying. You get sick of the holiday before it gets here. Same with Christmas. People put up their decorations November 1st. I'm already sick of Christmas by the time it's Christmas. Then she talks about how Halloween is getting more gruesome. Halloween has taken a sharp turn towards the explicitly gruesome in recent years. The same turn TV fiction has taken. For some people think it's acceptable to array their homes with manner of symbols and graphic depictions of evil, even on streets populated by young families. Decency, it seems, is deader than a decaying corpse you propped on your porch swing.
You can thank the zombie movement for that, I think.
Yeah, that's true. I got to tell you, I used the Walking Dead show. I liked it at first. I had to stop watching it. It's too depressing.
Oh, yeah?
That show is really, everyone just dies. It's just really depressing. I couldn't take too much of it. I'm not really are you into horror movies at all?
No, not at all.
I went and saw the movie It.
Unless it was Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Now, that was a good one.
I don't think that counts.
Oh, okay. No.
Young Frankenstein, I don't think that counts either. Or Disney's Halloween special. I'm not sure that counts either, Tom.
Oh, well.
I will say I saw It. My biggest problem with a lot of horror movies is they're just so unrealistic. I can't get scared at something that's,
doesn't seem logical.
Yeah, in It, this clown transforms and eats people, and it's just I don't know. It's just okay, it's interesting, entertaining, but I'm not scared. I mean, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
It's just weird. I get more scared of movies about nuclear apocalypse or about diseases that spread.
That's because you're a logical thinker. You're not an emotional thinker.
I know. I mean, I can get emotional about some things. Usually it has to do with animals.
Mm-hmm.
If there's anything dealing with innocent animals and something bad happens to them, then I cry like a little baby. I don't know why that is, but that's where. But I kind of agree with her that some of this has just gotten a little much. She ends here. She goes, before you reach it for your robotic mummy collection, think about it. If you're doing this just to out-decorate your neighbor, the tackiness and fright factor should be enough to turn you off from Halloween decorations. Tackiness will be with us through all seasons, unfortunately, but you don't have to take part in the worst of it. So, very against Halloween decorations. I have to admit, it does get out of hand sometimes. All right, I appreciate you all listening to the show tonight. If you miss any of the show, you know what to do. You know where to go. I shouldn't have to tell you. I tell you every show. But you can catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available or on Facebook. Send me a friend request. Follow me at Beyond Reason R on Twitter. Like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. Or go to 1025WFLA.com. And, I want you all to have a great weekend. And I'll catch you guys next time.